Alrighty guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Nomad Preacher. Today I wanted to go over, the importance of all the roles in the story. This is going to be a 3-part series. The first is going to be Moses, the second is going to be Esther, and the third is going to be Mary. Now, there's a reason that I'm doing this, right? And a lot of you are probably asking yourself, what is the reason that he wants to go over this, right? One, I feel like there's two overlooked groups of people in the Bible that a lot of people don't even want to look at. It's just so easy to overlook them that most people never ask why they get overlooked. The first group is women, right? Men were not the only ones that God used in order to fulfill his will in the Bible. So many times we like that male character over the female characters, and we miss the importance that these women have served in these stories. The second group of people, and the reason I'm going to talk about the second group of people, is because racism was a real thing in the Bible. Yeah, I know you're probably sitting there like, wait, what did he just say? Like, racism was an absolute thing, right? A lot of people hated the Jews, and a lot of people hated the Gentiles, including the Jews. The most hated group of people in the Bible was not the Jews. No, it was the Gentiles. Nobody wanted them to find salvation, and nobody cared about them. Even the apostles, when God told them directly to go to the Gentiles and preach salvation, they called it unclean because God hadn't told them anything about this yet. This was something new that they weren't used to. They were so used to hating these people that it was really hard to learn to love them. Much like today, some denominations hate others. Some Christians spend their whole time and their whole life hating people, when we're really supposed to be telling them about Christ and showing the example that Christ set. With that being said, and what this video is about, let's get into Exodus 1 through 2 and see what's going to be said today. It says this in Exodus 1 verses 8. It says this: "Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph." So let's stop right there, right? We're going to break this down, as I feel like this is really important. The context is really important. So Joseph had helped save Egypt through a famine, right? And God had used his wisdom inside of Joseph in order to save Egypt, and Israel was welcome to come in and move all their family into Egypt. Now at this point, we're going to see why the Pharaoh's afraid, right? "And he said to his people, Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." So not knowing anything about Israel or how he got there or the history of the past Pharaoh, he decides to oppress the people and put them into slavery. The reason is because they were too many. They were multiplying at such a fast rate that Egypt couldn't keep up. So now he wants them as slaves so that they're going to do his bidding. Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service and mortar and brick and all kinds of work in the field. In all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. When the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you serve as a midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live." But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. This is the first important role of our story right here. It's not Pharaoh. It's not any sort of man. It's women, because the midwives now had a choice, right? And due to their courage, these Israelite men were living, right? Pharaoh said kill them. The midwives didn't, because they feared God and knew that God would not approve of these babies being murdered. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, "Why have you done this, and let the male children live?" The midwives said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews, you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. This is the first decree we see like this in the Bible, where babies are actually going to be slaughtered. It's going to be a massacre. There's going to be crying in the night because their sons are going to get cast into the river. Exodus 2. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Again, Moses' mother is the second person of importance that we see in the story with any significance or character at all. Now, Jochebed, that was his mother's name, she decided to go against Pharaoh's decree of killing the baby and decided to cast him in the river, but not the way that Pharaoh said. We're going to see what she did and why her faith in God was so important. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the river bank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." So this is the third woman of importance, right? It's Pharaoh's daughter, right? You would think her loyalty would be to her father, but no. She decides to save a Hebrew baby, name it Moses, and literally save the baby's life, despite her father decreeing that the baby was supposed to be killed. See, these are 3 important women in the story of Moses. We see that without these 3 women, Moses wouldn't have even been alive. God wouldn't have even been able to use Moses, so God used the women first. Oftentimes, we overlook these 3 characters because we love the story of Moses, right? We like what Moses did. He etched a great chapter in history. But how do you get that great chapter of history without all the characters in the story? Without Pharaoh's daughter, without Jochebed, without the housewives, Moses would have never been born. So we really got to look at all the important people of the story in order to see that there was roles that were played and that each role had its own place in the story to make it important and to put it together in its place. So let's finish up here, right? Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. It's here that we see something not a lot of people think about too, which is that Moses' mother, Jochebed, actually raised him in the house of the Egyptian's daughter, right? So Pharaoh's daughter called for the handmaid to be called from the Hebrew women, as was culture for Hebrews to learn their own way. And his mother got the honor of actually raising him inside of, the Pharaoh's house. So I said, and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So now she's getting paid by the house of Pharaoh to raise her own son. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because she said, "I drew him out of the water." Now, it doesn't say Moses' Hebrew name or anything like that, but something a lot of people don't consider out here is that Moses would have been raised with knowledge of the Hebrew God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He would have been raised with that knowledge, but he also would have been raised with the knowledge of the Egyptian gods as well. So there's that as well. That's why when the burning bush called to Moses, he wasn't exactly startled. He wanted to hear the name of God that God wanted to be called. And when God said, "I am," Moses kind of actually understood who God was. But that's all I have for today. And we're going to do part 2 sometime soon. Part 2 is going to be Esther. Let me tell you what you thought of this and if you actually ever noticed these characters and their importance before.